Gambit Chads, let's be real for a second. If you're a grandmaster, you possess an unbelievable amount of knowledge about chess. You've seen hundreds of thousands of games, all of which start from this position, and you're not going to be surprised by move 4. You're not going to be surprised by move 4, or so you think. And for Grandmaster Andrew Tang, coming up for a day trip to New York City to the historic Marshall Chess Club for a Blitz tournament, that's probably what you could safely assume. Also, it's Blitz tournament. Andrew Tang, one of the best fast chess players in the world, faster at time control, even stronger he is. And he's already a very strong Grandmaster. But we were actually paired in round 9 of the FIDE Blitz tournament, and you can see here on this picture that I'll pull up, I have 6 out of 8 points, and he has 7 out of 8 points. We had actually each lost to Mikhail Bortnik, who was leading the tournament at that point, and I was playing white, and especially in Blitz, there's huge value in surprising your opponent. There's always huge value in surprising your opponent, and being in preparation, being in positions that you know and your opponent doesn't. But if I just play something normal, then I'm just going to get outplayed because my opponent knows more about chess and is a better chess player than I, and it's just very cool to be able to play against Andrew Tang in any capacity, and especially in a real FIDE rated Blitz game. And so we play e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and I could play something normal like bishop c4, bishop b5, and I played here d4 takes, but of course we go into the one and only Goring Gambit, and on move 4 I play c3, and I have another video covering this whole opening. And Andrew Tang is immediately thinking. He's immediately thinking, there's a look of minor surprise on his face, and not sure what to do, because he understands very quickly that if you take this pawn, if you accept this gambit, I play here bishop to c4. If you take another pawn, bishop takes b2, and this is a very dangerous position for black. It's a very dangerous version of the Danish gambit, which would start here with d4, takes c3, takes bishop c4, and then you try to get them to take all this, but black here has very quick strikes such as d5 to bail out of this and sacrifice back a little bit of material, but also be okay, develop very quickly. But those are not the same punches that black will have in this position, where d5 just allows your knight to be attacked right away. So Tang, in the game, did not go for d takes c3 and just trying to get to a normal-ish position, thinks for a while, which is very critical. This is a 3 minutes plus 2 second increment Blitz game. And this is round 9, the final round again. He plays here d5, which is also covered in the video. And so I guess he's assuming that I'll probably just take this pawn and take d4, and again we probably have some sort of equalish position where black will develop, I will develop, and it just is what it is, right? But that is not the idea. After d5 we play here another very tricky move, bishop to d3. And again, Tang still needs to navigate a series of tricks. So if you take either pawn, this can be dangerous. D takes c3 falls victim to e takes d5. And now if queen takes, white can actually castle or play knight takes c3. Castling is very interesting because I'll actually show here black can also play takes, hitting the rook, and gambiting all this stuff, and now castling. And in this position, white's actually down 2 pawns, but has all these open lines and can play knight c3, all these open diagonals, and a very dangerous position, again, for black to navigate. And Tang wanted absolutely no part of this, absolutely no part. If you take this one, again, black goes up a pawn, but another very dangerous position that they face where we'll take c6, we'll castle very quickly. For example, d takes c3. White here has a very nice move, queen e2, dodging the queen trade, being able to play knight takes c3, so let's say bishop e7, being able to play knight takes e3, castle very quickly, bring the bishop out, and bring the rooks to the center for a really pleasant position. And this is just great stuff, and I've gotten this in a lot of my Blitz games. But Tang, again, navigating all the Stockfish recommendations. It's a little tricky, because if you play knight out, then e5 is very nice. And next move, white is going to be able to play something like c takes d4 here, where all of a sudden, white's not down a pawn, but has fixed their center very nicely. So you can't take a pawn, you can't allow the pawns to push. So very careful developing move here, bishop to g4, trying to hold the pawn here, and still retain yourself being up a pawn, but not playing d takes c3. So pressuring the d4 square by causing some pinning problems this way. So castles, this is still all covered actually in the video. Taking place bishop e7, rook to e1. I'm still in preparation actually with rook to e1, challenging some key squares along this file. I can't quite take this pawn, again, because of knight takes d4 with the pin this way. So in the game, rook to e1, taking place knight f6. I play here e5, because with a lot of pressure now on this pawn, e5, knight d7, and so at this point, I have about a little over 3 minutes on my clock, because remember, it's 3 minutes plus 2 second increment. All I needed to do was just remember my lines. Andrew Tang was down to about 90 seconds. So I have about double his time. And, I mean, that's a massive advantage because the game I lost earlier against Bortnik, we just had an equal position and we were just playing, but he's able to play moves to retain equal position much, much faster than I am. And so he had about like 2 minutes when I had about like 10 seconds at some point. And so in a blitz out, of course, I ended up blundering in that game. And so I think that's especially how higher rated players can get you. They can play the same quality of moves as you, but also just much faster, right? And because they just see things faster. But in this position, that was still not the case because I was in preparation. And of course, not even Andrew Tang, who is a grandmaster and who's seen so much chess opening theory throughout his life, obviously, did not know this, did not know any of these moves. And so, and nonetheless, was spending time to find out all of Stockfish's recommendations, which of course he can, because again, he's a grandmaster if I haven't mentioned that before. So, bishop to b5 I played here. Again, now we're trying to put pressure on d4. We're trying to force black's hand. I want to take this. If black takes this, which they can, and it's actually, I believe, maybe Stockfish's recommendation to take it here. Although the evaluation here, yeah, minus 0.5. Takes and knight takes c3. So here, I think white has very good compensation for the pawn, actually, because black is going to struggle to defend this. For example, knight b6, we just play something like h3. Bishop comes out, and rooks will come nicely to the middle of the board. In the game, after bishop to b5, Tang had no interest in in giving any gambits and giving any sort of a compensation and just castled his king. So he's made it out of the opening perfectly fine. All of his pieces are out. He's castled. The only lasting damage, it really, is to black's clock, and this position is approximately equal with actually a minor advantage to white, about plus 0.1. So I play c takes d4 in this position, allowing takes f3. And the issue with this is that if I play queen takes f3, then there's knight takes d4, right? So that's why Andrew just took on f3 unprompted. My queen needed to defend the d4 pawn. I could have taken c6, but it would have been, I believe, some sort of concession, because I think after c5 here, black is doing well with their bishop pair and chipping away at my center. So in the game, I play c takes d4, and I have to play here g takes f3, which is uncomfortable, and it's certainly a concession, and it's why he took on f3. I open this g file into my king, but I'm not sure black's in the best position to attack my king, and nonetheless, I'm happy with my bishop pair, and I'm happy with the center, and if I can swap queens, in which case my king is safe, this was at least what I was thinking at the time, if I can swap queens, I'm very, very happy going into the endgame, especially with the time advantage I have. And so Andrew here plays bishop to b4, hitting my rook, and his idea of bishop to b4 was to get out the queen. So the bishop was in the way of the queen, and he gets out the queen to attacking post, and also attacking the d4 pawn now. What the engine keeps recommending for black is to just play f6 as quickly as possible. Just play f6, and if black can force a pawn trade here, then that would be very, very dangerous for me with these f-file and everything getting open. Here I would try to play e6, maybe, and try to dodge that, but it's a little bit unclear. So bishop to b4 and queen to h4, attacking this pawn. And note this pawn's not hanging because of the pin over here. I could play takes e6, but I think better was playing f4 here, and I was pretty satisfied with that. Really kind of holding my center together. I see f6 coming anyway, and I'd like to fortify this point. And now this is, I think, Andrew's first mistake of the game, where he plays here a6. a6, just hitting the bishop, and it's a very innocent-looking move, and he's asking, do I want to take this? Do I want to take that knight? And I think he'd be happy about this, just defending that pawn, giving ideas of c5. And again, he needs to make fast moves anyway, and a6 is a very obvious fast move to make. But actually, when I play bishop f1, this is a very, very important defensive resource that I have, and it's really not obvious, but it defends the h3 square, and it defends just like other things around my king. And now all of a sudden here, the tide starts to shift a little bit, where white is actually maybe the one who has some sort of initiative on the king side of the board. And so it looks like, okay, wait, my king is open, like, this shouldn't be good. But if white can get their pieces around and start playing f5, then this could be very, very dangerous for black. And what should have happened, according to Stockfish, is this move f6. Again, trying to cause some sort of pawn trade here. Let's say I just played like something like bishop e3. After takes, okay, bishop e3, I mean, I defend f2, but this is kind of some sort of dangerous position here. And in fact, there's already tactics with takes and d4, forking the bishop and the knight here, and causing all sorts of problems defending this. And with my king completely open, this is not fun. So f6 would have been a very strong resource. In the game, a6 and bishop to f1. And now Andrew just plays this move, knight e7. Again, I think f6 was recommended, but I think f6 at this point, so Stockfish recommends a very interesting line now, and I think this really demonstrates the power of the bishop coming back and just being able to defend the king here and just really try to take the initiative of these open files. And it's the move rook to e3, which it does a couple things. It gets out of the pin, so then the d5 pawn is hanging, right? So keep that in mind. So if black here plays takes, and this looks very dangerous, because if you recapture, then takes f2, because the rook is now in the game. But the move here being rook to h3, with the bishop's defense, and all of a sudden this queen has nowhere good to go. You'll note the queen's only squares are f6, e7, and d8, with the white queen guarding the g4 square. And if you go to like something like f6 after knight takes d5, then again the queen has nowhere good to go. Because queen g6, rook g3, this rook is doing a fantastic job hitting all these squares. So if knight takes d5, if the queen retreats like even further, then after something like queen to h5, then white's the one making threats over here, and this bishop can spring into the game here or here on all these diagonals. And white is having all the fun in this position, making a lot of very serious threats. So it's really that rook coming over and all of white's pieces start to spring into action. In the game, knight to e7 though. So knight e7 is a pretty logical move. It actually fights against maybe some expansion like f5. It defends this pawn further, and also maybe tries to put black's own knight there. And so I still should have played this move rook e3. I still should play this move rook e3 and realize that after rook h3, it actually, if I could play rook h3 in one move, I think the queen is actually trapped. If black does nothing, after rook h3, this queen's trapped. So black does need to be a bit careful. But in a position like this, if I can just even drive this queen back, that's excellent stuff. And even white can start having some sort of initiative on the king side of the board. Black's just not getting their rooks and such into the game fast enough. So, but in this position, I was still pretty eager to actually just swap the queens off. I was still very worried about the file onto my king. It was a kind of simplified understanding. I mean, it is a Blitz game, but simplified understanding of the game that I have relative to Andrew, which is that, okay, my king's unsafe, I just want to trade queens, which makes sense, but it wasn't the best decision in this scenario, because I could have actually taken over the initiative on the king side of the board. So queen to d3 here, and Andrew just plays a solid move like c6 to further fortify the d5 pawn in case this pin dies. And now I play here queen h3, and I was very excited about queen h3 because it forces a queen trade. It forces a queen trade because it also hits this knight, and also I think this queen has nowhere to go anyway. And after takes, here's a very, very important strategical move by Andrew. And from this point on, he really just demonstrates why he's a grandmaster. But if you guys want to pause the video, you can find this very, very important strategical move. It is this move pawn to f5, and something that I hadn't really properly considered before playing queen to h3. To be clear, actually, I think white is still a little bit better here, but white wasn't better a few moves later. But okay, of course, if I en passant, major shout out to r/anarchy chess, but if I en passant, knight takes f6, okay, the knight's no longer hanging, this bishop defends the knight, and this is kind of a disaster of a pawn structure, right? So that's the other thing, right? If I'm going to trade queens, I should try to insist that the queen trade happen on g3, and this would be much, much better with the pawn structure fixed. Here white is undoubtedly better with the bishop pair, with actually a really nice pawn structure, and after bishop to h3, maybe we can support f5, and these pawns can really start rolling with a lot of mobility. Oh, I'm so sorry. Don't look. So in the game, pawn to f5, so it does a couple things. So it gives me this protected passed pawn, but if black puts a knight on this e6 square, which black is trying to do, it's a very, very well-positioned knight. Knights blocking passed pawns, especially protected passed pawns, do a great, great job. That's the piece you want doing that, right? For example, if you were to just put like a rook there or a bishop there, it would be doing absolutely nothing other than just being in the way, and it could be attacked. But a knight there still does a lot, and you'll note this knight would be putting a lot of pressure on f4 and d4, which I would have to uncomfortably defend, and it stops my pawn. Alright, so f5 really kind of freezes all my pawns and also blocks the bishop here. If black were to play a move like knight b6 instead, then after pawn to f5, these pawns have, again, a lot of mobility, and both my bishops are playing. But after f5, I realize, okay, I got these dark square center pawns and a dark square bishop. What I'm going to try to do is swap my dark square bishop for that. And it wasn't the best idea, and I'll show you why. Strategically, it makes sense, but concretely in this position, it wasn't the best idea. So bishop d2 gets in the way of this pin, and after to e8, I'm very excited about this next move, which was a very bad move, and it was this move knight to b1, which looks good. It looked good to me at the time, because I'm very happy to swap these dark square bishops. I'm very happy to sort these dark square bishops, because if your opponent has a dark square bishop and light square center pawns, then that bishop is by definition actually the good bishop. It is not restrained by its own pawns and has a lot of freedom in diagonals. Whereas this bishop, as you can see by being restrained by its own center pawns, actually just doesn't have a lot of freedom. So knight b1 forcing this trade, I was very, very happy with. In reality, I should have just played like a more natural move, just like something like a3 or rook c1, after which white is maybe a tiny bit better. But in the game, knight b1, bishop takes d2 wasn't a good decision, because this bishop, which I was so desperate to trade, actually was doing a very critical job, and maybe you can see here why white is not doing so well after black's next move, knight g6, and all of a sudden, defending this f4 pawn is impossible. It's impossible. It sucks having the doubled pawns. I don't even have rook f1 or anything, and I don't have another pawn that could defend it. This pawn is just lost. It needed the dark square bishop's help, and so from here, things are not good, and Andrew just beats me up a pawn from this point on, in spite of me still having some time advantage. So here, bishop to f1 I played, knight takes f4, it was going to hit my bishop anyway, so I moved it, knight to f3 I played, and now Andrew gets his knight on the dream square, knight to e6. That's exactly what he wanted. So I played knight to f3, seeing that coming. I wanted to defend this pawn, but knight to e6 does something else. So I play here like b4. I'm trying to maybe expand, do some minority attack here, open some files, get some pawn weaknesses here, just some sort of counterplay. If I can play your a4, b5, that's actually generally how you attack a structure like this, a4 and b5, and then we want to open all these files. So b4, but Andrew plays here g5. So with the knight support against this, and now it's threatening g4, which would drive my knight away, and so black could collect that pawn. So I play here rook d1, so I had to give another defender of d4. Now knight b6, Andrew getting the other knight into the game. I play your a4, so I'm still trying to maybe play something like b5, but after rook d8, I realized that maybe I don't want to play b5. And the issue of playing b5 right now is I think this move a5, and after takes, you see here, these rooks are both stuck defending pawns that both these knights are attacking, which is just not a fun situation at all. And it's just not fun. I feel like I wasn't the one that made weaknesses in my opponent's position. It's just both my rooks are tied down to these knights. Also, I think totally fine is taking and pushing c5 and just rolling with black's extra pawn here, just rolling with it, and these pawns are quite good, and also a 3-on-2 majority over here. The thing is, I have this passed pawn, technically, in exchange for black having a passed pawn over here and a passed pawn over here, but it's just completely stuck against this knight that's doing a fantastic job blockading. So this move f5, after trading queens, was really very critical strategic decision in the game. In the game, rook to d8, I played knight c2, just trying to bring my pieces out, and knight c4. So rook d8, already in preparation for me taking and opening the file here. And my idea, I had an idea here, I did see this coming. I wanted to play your a5, so a5 stopping b5, and my idea was to try and win this pawn. Stopping b5 with, yes, en passant. So my idea was rook a3, rook c3, and trying to take it, which I felt like that pawn couldn't really be defended. And so after f4, rook a3, but Andrew has his own ideas of playing rook d5, and he finally brings all his rooks into the game. And now after I take this, it looks like maybe I've got my pawn back, but there is rook takes e5 with the pin on this rook. So he stays up a pawn. I do take that rook, takes d1, king g2, and h5. And now you really see just how good of a grip he's kept on the position. He's still just up the one pawn, and actually this extra pawn here is not very useful, because you'll never really create a passed pawn there at present, but this 3-on-2 majority is actually quite scary. Even though it's not really threatening to create a passed pawn, it is threatening actually with his last move h5 that he played so quickly, so naturally, to play h4, h3, which is checkmate. He couldn't do it with f3 because my king can step up, but he's playing h4, h3, so he's already got my king in a mating net. So h5, I play h3, and now, just very naturally, calmly, he plays king f7. And if you look at just like all of, I think, black's last moves since picking up this pawn, it's really impressive stuff. Like, he's just playing knight to e6, gets that knight on the ideal square, takes some space on the king side, drives my pieces back, gets this other knight into the game, onto the open files, and he's getting now all his rooks into the game, while also, keeping his expansion over here, keeping the pressure on. If he gets an f3, then that's really dangerous for back rank mate threats. Keeping all the pressure on, gets all his pieces into the game, h5 comes, and now he brings up the king into the game. And this is a situation where I look over at my pieces, and I'm starting to get a little lower on time, and I can't play quite as well as Andrew when having almost no time on my clock. But these knight and this rook just have no moves. Like, I'd love if my rook were, like, here and could invade my opponent's camp and try to do something, start taking pawns. But this pawn that I have is completely stuck again. And my knight and my rook just have no moves. So I play here rook e4. I don't know. I'm just trying to... like, this is my vision. But the issue is that when the king continues to come up, my rook is under attack and just has no squares. Rook e2 loses it to f3 check. f3 here loses, I think, big issues with rook d2 check, and this pawn is now even more dangerous after that. And so I just have to come back rook c4, stopping my knight's plan. And here Andrew comes up with the finishing touch, not even taking this pawn, but knight g5. And so rook c5, okay, I'm like, okay, maybe something. But knight to f3, and immediately I am actually checkmated with rook to g1. Who would have thought that there was a checkmate just a few moves away? But I guess he had seen this checkmating pattern. Okay, so I asked him after the game. Actually. And so I resigned in this position with rook to g1 imminent. I can give one spite check. I guess technically two spite checks. I can play rook c1. But otherwise, this is actually a gorgeous mating pattern where my king is stuck. And I think a really, really exceptionally well-played endgame by him. And exceptionally well done navigating the opening traps and playing a lot of Stockfish's recommendations just to attain an equal position out of the opening. And so I asked him about it after, and what he was thinking here. He wasn't even considering this move. He's like, there's absolutely no way that I'm walking into... He realized I was going to play bishop c4. He's like, there's absolutely no way that I'm walking into this gambit prep. And so he's just trying to play d5 and escape it. And then bishop d3, he's like, I've got to navigate this again. And he said this is a very legitimate blitz weapon, in his opinion, that he'd play in, like, legitimate blitz games. And he said, quote, it's better than the Scotch Four Knights. So, which would be... or not the Scotch Four Knights, just the Four Knights, rather, which would be this position here. So, tell me your thoughts on the Goring Gambit. I absolutely think it's a great weapon, and I got a better position out of the opening and a time advantage out of the opening against Grandmaster Andrew Tang. Better position coming around this position here, where I had the ability here to play rook e3, rook h3. I did something else instead. I ended up getting outplayed in the endgame, unfortunately. But let me know your thoughts on the Goring Gambit. I'll continue to be playing it on stream. I think this is a really, really excellent innovation. And thanks so much to Andrew Tang for the game. And thanks so much to you guys for watching. Like and subscribe, and have a great day.